It was nighttime. Rain was pouring when one or maybe several individuals dug up the body of one of the biggest celebrities in cinema history. That story is completely true, and it's actually crazier than what you can imagine. The body is Charlie Chaplin's, and right now you may be wondering why on earth would someone steal his body? Who could have done something like that? And was the body even found? Well, we'll answer all those questions in this video. Let's dive into the crazy story of how Charlie Chaplin's body was stolen. Before we delve into that story, let's go back a few years to when Charlie Chaplin was still alive. It's pointless to explain who Charlie Chaplin was, as everyone kinda knows about the man and his movies. However, not many know about the last part of his life, the last couple of decades before his death, a time of upheaval in his life and career. The Cold War was in full swing, and Chaplin's progressive and anti-capitalist political views started to bother a lot of people in the US, particularly J. Edgar Hoover, who was the founder of the FBI. Hoover did all he could to destroy Chaplin's reputation. Therefore, in the public eye, Chaplin was now viewed as a communist. His public image had been completely tarnished by the Red Scare, and consequently, his movies were struggling to find the financial and critical success they used to. Chaplin made very few movies during the 50s because of that. He was even forced to leave the United States. What happened was, during a trip to Europe, the visa that allowed him to go back to the US was revoked. Yes, Chaplin was British, and he never could obtain US citizenship, partly because of the communism allegations. He finally settled in Switzerland. Why did he choose Switzerland? Well, I'm not going to try to convince you that he came here because of the beautiful landscapes or because of Swiss chocolate. It's obviously because Switzerland is a tax haven. He and his wife Una, who was 36 years younger than him, by the way, yeah, that's a pretty big age difference. Anyway, as I was saying, he and his wife Una settled in a big mansion located in the small town of Corsier-sur-Vevey, where Chaplin spent the last years of his life. On December 24, 1977, Chaplin was celebrating his last Christmas Eve with his family. He had been suffering from a bronchitis for a few days. His family knew that the end was near, and on December 27, 1977, at 4 in the morning, Charlie Chaplin died at the age of 88 years old. Interestingly, Charlie Chaplin actually continued working on different projects even in his final days. He even worked on a new music score for his movie The Kid. 2 days later, on December 27, 1977, Chaplin's burial in the Corsier-sur-Vevey cemetery was broadcast worldwide. Millions and millions of people from all over the world watched it live. Una, Chaplin's widow, his daughter, Geraldine, Christopher, his youngest son, and the rest of the family continued to live in the same mansion in Corsier-sur-Vevey. And the story should end there. But you know as well as I do that things don't always go the way we planned, and in that case, no one could have predicted what was about to happen. 3 months after Charlie's death, March 2nd, 1978, Una, who was at home mourning her husband, suddenly received a phone call from the Swiss police. The police told her that her husband's grave had been dug up and his body had disappeared during the night. The police had no idea who stole the coffin, and there were absolutely no clues on site except for a few tire tracks found in the mud. So the Swiss police really struggled to solve this fairly unusual case, and the fact that they only enlisted 2 officers on the case clearly didn't help. As a result, the investigation dragged on for quite some time. However, one element was about to make police work even more difficult. Media outlets from all over the world suddenly started taking interest in this unusual case.
La police suisse se perd en conjecture sur les mobiles de l'étrange vol du cercueil de Charlie Chaplin que nous apprenions hier peu avant l'heure du journal.
This resulted in journalists and individuals developing a multitude of theories, each one more outlandish than the last. Some believed that random admirers wanted to keep the corpse for themselves, while others suspected that it was a British nationalist who stole the body to repatriate it to Britain, Chaplin's native country. There were even rumors that conservative Catholics had organized an anti-Semitic action because they didn't want a Jew to be buried in the Christian cemetery of Corsier-sur-Vevey. However, Charlie Chaplin was not Jewish, so this theory was complete nonsense. So there was a lot of speculation going on, and everybody had their own little theory. Anyway, we have to admit that it is a pretty strange story. Why would anyone want to steal a body? That doesn't make any sense. At first, the police made very slow progress in the investigation. They received tons of phone calls from psychics and people who claimed to have had an enlightenment about the location of the body. The police actually followed some of these somewhat crazy leads, but obviously they didn't find anything useful. A few days passed and still nothing. The body was nowhere to be found and the Swiss police had zero suspects. Basically, the investigation was at a standstill, and for the time being, the mystery remained unsolved. The only thing that the police was pretty confident about was that the perpetrator probably had an accomplice. Because have you ever tried dragging a 200 kilos coffin? Let me tell you, that's not something you can easily do on your own. It's only a few days later that, for the first time, the investigation finally started to move forward. Una receives a second phone call, and this time, the phone call doesn't come from the police. The person who called Una was actually the kidnapper himself. The man claims the body is in his possession, and he demands a ransom. And so, from there, the guy is gonna do a bunch of things that will kind of reveal his amateurism. At first, he asks for $600. Then he changes his mind and asks for 600 Swiss francs, which is absolutely not the same amount of money. He then settles for 500 Swiss francs to give back the body to the family. To which Una responds roughly, "No man, I ain't giving you any money." A tough blow for the thief, whose plan doesn't seem to work at all. But he doesn't stop there. He continues to frequently calling the family for several weeks. However, the Chaplins refuse to give in to the blackmail. There is absolutely no way they are giving any money to this guy. To ensure that the kidnapper was not lying about having the body in his possession, the family requested pictures of the coffin as proof. So to prove that he was telling the truth, the thief sent the family a photograph of the coffin he had taken. But Una still refuses to pay. The robber was now short on ideas to make the Chaplins pay. So he did something that really terrified the family. He started to make threats, and pretty serious ones actually. Long story short, he told them that if they didn't pay, he would take his shotgun and shoot Christopher, the youngest boy in the family, in the legs. I'm no expert, but I think we can question the mental state of that guy now. After receiving these threats, the family, understandably, felt terrified. So, as a precaution, the police escorted Christopher to school every day. I think it's important to remember that all the members of the family were grieving at this time, and going through all this at the same time must have been absolutely horrifying. Una couldn't take this anymore. So her daughter Geraldine took over the negotiations with the kidnapper. As time went by, the thief reduced the ransom to 150,000 Swiss francs, but Geraldine still replied, "No can do." The guy was completely hopeless, but he continued to threaten them. Meanwhile, the police had an idea. The kidnapper was constantly calling the family manor. They thought that if they tapped the phone at the manor, they might be able to track down the kidnapper and determine where he was calling from. And you know what? That plan actually paid off. They were able to track down the calls to Lausanne, a town located 20 kilometers from Corsier-sur-Vevey. 20 kilometers is approximately 12 miles. They also found out that the guy was calling from a phone booth. Now they were sure about it. The kidnapper was actually located in the city right next door. All that was left to do was to set a trap and catch him. At this point, the Chaplin ceased all interactions with the thief, and it was their lawyer who took over negotiations. And thanks to this lawyer, the police was finally able to set a trap for the thief. The kidnapper called once again to negotiate, but this time it wasn't the lawyer who answered the phone. Instead, it was one of the lawyer's assistants that picked it up. The assistant said to the thief, "The lawyer is currently unavailable. He requests you to call back on May 16th at 9:30 a.m. And the thief agrees, not suspecting that this request will cause his downfall. Since the police know that the guy is calling from different phone booths in the city of Lausanne, they now just have to put every phone booth in the city under surveillance. On May 16, 1978, more than 200 Swiss police officers were deployed to catch the amateur desecrator. It's actually a significant increase from the 2 officers that were initially assigned to the case. Each police officer is posted in front of a phone booth, and this plan actually worked because the thief was caught extremely fast. Finally, the family's ordeal has come to an end, even though the body has yet to be returned. Now let me explain to you what motivated our tomb robber in the first place. So, who's actually behind all this? Well, meet Roman Vardas, a 25-year-old Polish mechanic and political refugee who had only one dream: owning a garage, becoming his own boss, and just succeed in life. Can you guess where this is going? The only problem is that the man is completely broke. So one day he comes up with a brilliant idea. While reading the newspapers, he stumbles on two stories. One is about an Italian mobster who had dug up the body of one of his enemies to blackmail the family. And the second one is about the fact that Maria Callas's funeral urn had been stolen in the Perpetrators cemetery in Paris. Then he wonders, why not do the exact same thing and bring home the bacon? The only problem is that he has to find someone who died recently and who could be famous enough to make the most money out of it. And which recently deceased celebrity did Roman Vardas choose? Charlie Chaplin. Okay, let's take a step back and uncover how he did it. About 3 months after Chaplin's funeral, Roman proposed the idea to a friend, Goncho Ganev, a Bulgarian refugee and mechanic. At first, Goncho Ganev had some reservations about his friend's idea, understandably so. Ultimately, the young Polishman managed to convince his friends that he had an unbeatable plan, and here they went to steal Charlie Chaplin's body. On the night of March 1st, at 1 p.m., the perpetrators drove to the Corsier-sur-Vevey cemetery to exhume Chaplin's body. They began to dig as quietly as possible, then dragged the 200 kilos coffin to their vehicle parked in the central alley of the cemetery. So, based on the information I found, the original plan was to exhume the coffin, then dig a deeper hole in the ground, bury it a few meters below, and cover it with dirt. The goal was to make it appear as if they had stolen the coffin, when in fact it had not moved at all. The only problem was it was pouring rain on the night of the theft, and the ground was all muddy. This made it impossible for them to execute this plan. The two thugs had to improvise and drove to a cornfield in Noville to bury it. Noville is a small town nearby. Once the corpse was hidden, they waited for a few days before calling Una. And the rest of the story, well, you already know it. So let's skip ahead to the end. And you'll see that the end of the story still has some surprises in store for us. When the authorities arrested Roman Vardas, he gave the name of his partner and led them to the spot where the coffin was hidden. That same night, he accompanied the police to help them find the body. But Vardas was unable to pinpoint the exact location where they had buried the coffin. So the police had to dig several holes before they found it. When they finally found the coffin, they had to open it to verify the occupant's identity, and the examining magistrate certified that the remains belonged to Charlie Chaplin. The horror and anguish of the Chaplin's family finally dissipated.
Oh, I was very, very happy, of course, and thrilled with the Swiss police, who were marvelous. They kept on the job, for 2 months. I got discouraged, but they didn't.
His body was buried a second time in an intimate ceremony at the Corsier-sur-Vevey cemetery under a 2-meter-long concrete plaque to ensure that the body is not going anywhere. Roman Vardas has been sentenced to 4.5 years in prison, whereas his accomplice Goncho only received 18 months. While they were in prison, they expressed their remorse by writing several letters of apology to the Chaplin's family, and in response, Chaplin's family ultimately forgave them. I truly recommend you click on this video if you want to discover another amazing story about movies. Don't forget to subscribe, we have a lot of videos coming up in the next weeks, so you can click on the bell icon to get notified when a new video comes out. As for me, I'll see you in the next one, bye bye.